Dave, it's great to have you on the Small Business Diaries podcast. Thanks for joining us. I wanted to ask the first question, though, of this episode, and it's a really broad one, so sorry about that. But who are you?
No problem. Yeah, I can start with that definitely. So maybe if I start on the work side, I guess like I've been working in tech for about 20 years. Started out as a developer engineer, really studied computing at uni. And then that just kind of evolved from there, really. So more into kind of business analyst, delivery manager, kind of product manager roles. Worked quite a few different places, kind of in and around Manchester mainly. So started out at CDL, kind of one of Stockport's biggest employers, like a insurance house, a software house for the insurance industry. Moved to the BBC, did a couple of years there, and then really kind of moved into more freelance contract work and not looked back really. So worked with a few places like kind of mix of public and private sector. Cinch did a stint there. Transport for Greater Manchester, NHS Digital. So quite a real kind of broad range of different organisations and industries.
Yeah.
Um,
And what is it about tech that's so interesting for you?
it's always been there, really. I think getting showing my age, but like a BBC Micro as a kid and Commodore, stuff like that, and it's always been there. Tech, I think part of it as well. Like I've always been a kind of scientist at heart, so like that kind of computer science element to it. But it's grown more into the kind of the user experience and like really building really great products that kind of have a really big impact. But tech's always been there really as a kind of undercurrent across.
Yeah, I can relate. I mean, I studied CS at uni as well, and I had a Commodore 64 as well when I was a kid. So I'm showing my age now. That I was kind of taking apart and playing with as well. So what's interesting to me is like you moved away. You do talk about tech, but being in product is very much about people and very much about like how people, use tech and use products. So what is it about that that interests you?
I think it's the combination of that, like you say, it's the kind of the messiness of like it's the engineering, the science element of it, but then it's how you kind of harness all of that messiness and make it as simple as possible for users, really. So it's kind of combining that almost how you really diverge, but bringing that back in to do all of the heavy lifting. And I'm always attracted to like really challenging problems, really, the kind of gnarlier stuff. So it's one of the trickiest but most rewarding areas to work in, I think. So yeah, that's a big
Yeah,
one.
definitely, because a big problem is it's good to get you see things that suck into, but then the
Mhm.
payoff is simplifying that, kind of at the end. And it's really interesting that you like mentioned simplicity, because that's a lot of a theme in a lot of the episodes that we've kind of talked about here with business owners, like wanting to simplify complex problems.
Give us a little bit of who you are personally.
Yeah, of course. So I guess headlines there. So I live in South Manchester, kind of been here most of my life, studied in Sheffield, but not too far away, and then came back to Manchester. I've got two young kids, two boys, 5 and 7, who, yeah, keep me on the toes, keep me busy. And then other than that, really, I'd say main interest, as you can probably see, quite a keen, but like probably failed musician. Quite like to think
I
of.
was going to say, how good are you?
Uh, Not very, I think would be the answer. I can get away with it. Lockdown helped a lot. Definitely kind of polished.
So I couldn't ask you to do like a little quick, riff for us right now.
Let's see how we get on, maybe. No, it might be a stretch too much. I'm not sure I'd subject that on the audience. But
That was my next question was can you like sing your next answer in like a musical like kind of riff?
they have been known to, yeah, come off the wall every now and again, but might be a stretch too far. If you had to dig up on YouTube, you might find the band I was in the 20s. They dig quite deep, I think, to find them.
I didn't know that, so I obviously did do my research.
Yeah, nothing of note. I wouldn't worry too much on that. But yeah, I guess that it's like sports is the other big one. So keen playing football and squash while I can keep going. I try and get out and keep as active as I can. But yeah, I guess that's me in a nutshell.
And we've had a few people on the series that talk about football, but squash hasn't really been a key sport. Give us more about why you like squash so much, and what do you play for club?
So I don't play for a club, and I got to it quite late, so I'd never really done racket sports as a kid. But just one of my friends got into it in like kind of late 20s, early 30s. So I just gave it a go, and it's stuck really well. I think it's more of a, particularly now having kids, like the ease of being able to just line up a game of squash is like a lot lower friction than, being able to get a game of football already. And I think there's an individual element to it as well. Like, football's great, bit of team sport and stuff, but that kind of different, it's all you, it's the focus on you, is quite an interesting one. So yeah, I quite enjoy squash, would recommend it. It's quite a niche sport, but I think the more I talk to people, it feels like it's getting a bit more attention in the UK.
I want to fast forward a little bit now. And you work for all these companies, you worked at the BBC, you worked private, you worked public. And I just wanted to know, like, what was it that made you want to start your business? Why did you want to do that, and why make that change?
I think probably the main thing is meeting my business partner, to a co-founder, Sam Quayle. Like that'd always be what I come back to there. I think it was like we worked together for a year or two on, it was probably my second or third contract engagement. So it was Department for Transport's Blue Badge, like for kind of helping disabled people park closer to where they need to be. So redesigning that service, which was like, again, coming back to liking the difficult challenges. It was a really gnarly problem, but also like one of the most rewarding things I've done. So I guess maybe to set the scene on that a little bit, like that's, I think there's over 200 councils in the UK that all do it a bit differently across the 4 different nations. I think anecdotally, it was like the most complained about public service. So like that, starting on a good footing. But really, I think it was us working on that and kind of doing it as well as we've ever done it, like across the other places that we've worked. It like everything seemed to gel. And I think Sam and I connected really well. Like he's more of his background in product design, whereas mine's more in product management and delivery and that side of things. But we both kind of gelled and like good foils for each other, and except like really kind of appreciate and understand the different like functions, disciplines that you have in cross-functional teams delivering stuff. So I think we never talked around it then, but I think it planted the seed that actually maybe there's something in that, the way that we did that, and the impacts that we had. It felt like a kind of perfect storm there. Like we, really improved the kind of user experience. We saved, I think it was like around 5 million projected savings annually for that service, bringing it in. Won a few awards, but it was like we were thinking like, could we take this on and do this elsewhere, have this impact and work in this really rewarding fashion? So I think that was the main catalyst for it, really.
And was it ever on the agenda to go into business, or did it just
not at that point? I think it was like Sam after that, like we worked together a little bit since then, but he moved to a consultancy in the north, really, and kind of set up their design capability and kind of grew that from scratch to, I think there might have been 50 or so like designers in a few years. And I think that kind of planted the seed as well. And I think in doing that, like when the call came through, I was kind of expecting it. So I'm like, there's a good chance we might look to do something. And when he asked the question, I was like, yeah, I think I've got to do it, really. I think part of it as well was that the impacts that I feel I've had in teams, it's like, as one person, as the product manager, or it might be a delivery lead or a business analyst in a team, to be able to amplify that and actually see, can we do that more broadly and have a bigger impact? I think that was the big motivator, really.
It's interesting. Like in the previous episodes I've been listening to, some of the business owners, I mean, there's been a couple of stories where they've just fell into it by chance, which is, if that's okay with me saying this, I kind of feel like that's your experience here. But there was another episode where the previous guest, was absolutely driven and determined on, kind of running their own business. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask you, what's your superpower? What's your USP that makes you unique?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think maybe a little cop out of an answer, but I think it does dovetail really well with kind of product development, actually. It's that kind of T-shaped nature. It's that generalist. It's maybe going back to how Sam and I work so well together. It was that appreciation that like the whole that is greater than the sum of the parts. It's an acknowledgement that there's a lot more to it than just being a specialist in one role. I think that's probably the main thing that I would say. Probably if I was looking for any other attributes that kind of maybe the need to really have an impact, certainly on kind of like user like having an impact on kind of achieving meeting user needs, goals, helping businesses really have a big impact. Like that was probably the biggie. And whilst I've done that in product teams, that like really lends itself to businesses as well. So much of that is transferable. So yeah, that's probably what I'd say.
I kind of feel like Sam's the elephant in the room, and I almost feel that like it's really interesting that you use the word foil, which I found fascinating actually. And what I wanted to know is, what does Sam give you that you don't have, and what do you give Sam that he doesn't have?
I'd say the main ones from a kind of almost like a character personality level is probably he's with his background in design much more on the creative side. I'd say in the aesthetics and design probably maybe more user focused than I am. On the other side, I probably bring more kind of delivery, leaning into the delivery side and more meticulous, maybe the ops element of it. So I think we might have seen that on a lower level in teams, but working together as a pair in the organization, we definitely see that. But at the same time, I think there's a real understanding that we'll cover for each other in that sense. It might be actually, it's okay if I do some of the creative things, Sam drives some of the maybe more meticulous things, but that'd probably be the big one there.
You said you have known Sam for a while?
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously when he made the call, you were definitely there. But you said that you've been prepared for it. Is that because, you and Sam had been talking about this as a milestone for a number of years? So it was quite comfortable, that conversation, rather than it's a light bulb moment, we should do it. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I think so. I think like maybe we'd not been talking around it together, but it certainly had been in my mind, and I probably had bounced it off other like practitioners I'd worked with in the past. Similar like conversations with my wife on that front. Like I'd been an independent contractor for 7 or 8 years or so, and it's like, can I keep doing that until retirement? Should I go aim broader than that? From a kind of lifestyle perspective. So it had always been in my mind, so it wasn't a surprise when it came. But I think Sam had been giving it some thought for a while, and kind of came with almost like, here's what I think it will look like and what the 5 or 10 years will look like. And it was like just stepping through that, even though it was quite like embryonic, was like, yeah, that's exactly how I'd play it. And the fact that just matched so nicely, it was like, right, let's roll. So there's probably, I don't know, a good 6 months, 12 months of conversations of what would it look like, how would we do it. So when we actually did it and pushed the button, it felt a very natural shift, really.
So for listeners who are probably thinking similar things to you and Sam, I suppose one of the key things that made you comfortable at the switch is that obviously you had been an independent consultant before, so you kind of knew the ropes of what to do. But the real driving force was just to say, we think that bigger picture over a 5 to 10 year plan, this is what the solution and our situation will look like. And it was attractive to you, and it sounded like you were confident in that delivery. And it wasn't just let's just see how this next year goes. It was a big, much more of a wider forecast. Not necessarily the detail, but just the overall, vision of where you both are going. So that was good.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we should go into the company now, if that's okay. What is your company name? What does it do? Let's get some details. Give us a summary.
Yeah, let's go for it. So, company name is Hyperact, as you can probably see on the hoodie. So we're coming up to a couple of years in, really, but I guess might introduce ourselves differently depending on who we're talking to. But I think the most common way we'd frame it is a tech consultancy or a product development consultancy. And I guess in the simplest terms, it's kind of an extension of how I've described myself and Sam working and the kind of cross-functional teams and really looking to create and grow great products. So what we do really is provide typically product managers, designers, engineers, just to help organizations really kick on, whether that's creating a new product, whether it's improving a product that's there, whether it's moving a product to a new market, really. And yeah, I guess on top of
Do you hire these people, or are you hiring them for a particular project, or are they're permanent members of staff?
Yeah, so it's a mix really, and I think we've evolved as where we've got to. So we made our first hire last year. I guess, like I said, like on the kind of product management and design front, like Sam and I are practitioners. We both work with client organizations. We'll go in there. We'll do the role. That's what really drives us, is working with teams and moving things on. But we brought in Rob, our kind of design leads, back end of last year. So we've got him in there, and it's great to have another 50% increase in another person, another sounding board, bringing ideas, perspectives, and actually been a really great hire. And we're looking to really kind of push on with that the next few months. But we have.
And why did you feel like the design lead was the right next step for you? Like, what made you feel like, okay, firstly, we needed another person, and then the second one was, there's a whole bunch of different specialities you could potentially hire for. Why was design lead the number one?
So I'd say it was more the person than the role.
Okay.
Just kind of where we're at with the recruitment that we're looking to do at the moment. I think the most important thing for us is to, ultimately our people is our product. So having like really, dynamite, the best practitioners you can go in, have the biggest impact. But also I think help us, what's really key is having the right people in there to help us grow and like set the baseline of this is Hyperact, this is what we do, the culture elements of it. And I think Rob was very much on that side. He could have been an engineer or a product person.
I wanted to ask a follow-up question, actually, like, while we're talking about hiring. And in some of the previous episodes, some of the business owners have been it's been challenging to get to the point where they're ready to hire someone, chiefly because in some instances there's been a little bit of like apprehension about surrendering elements of their business, or even just apprehension about like, am I ready to take the next step? I just want to know, like, was that ever in your mindset, or was it very clear, like from day one, that you were like, I'm going to build the team and I'm comfortable doing that?
Yeah, that's very intentional in there. I would say, like, we're very aware of our limitations and our capacity. Sam and I and have already kind of working towards that. And Rob, like to Steve's question there, that was a big part of why we felt bringing Rob in. It wasn't just we've got design asks, we need a designer. It was, we need help. It's tricky enough being a designer or a product manager or an engineer in a team, but to grow an organization around the sides of that, like that was as important. And yeah, I think that is a very intentional thing. We know ultimately, we're going to need help. We don't have expertise in the different things that you'll need to scale and run a larger organization. So yeah, there's no apprehension there on that side at all.
What things did you think you needed when you started your business up? And what things do you think you need now you've got into kind of doing it? Because you've not been going for that long, right? You've been going for 2 years, right?
Yeah, coming up to 2 years now. Yeah, a tricky one. I think like focus has always been a big one, and that still is relevant now. But I think like really, so much of it is kind of applying what we do in the day job of working in a team on a product, but it's being really focused of like, this is the user need that we're looking to meet. This is our proposition, and kind of having the conviction, that tenacity to kind of kick on with that and see what you can, how that lands. I think a strong network has been a big one. Like maybe I thought, I almost, to turn it on its head a little, I thought there might have to be a lot more kind of salesy stuff, a lot more kind of really kind of forced business development. But I think there's been less of that. I think it's been more conversations and more explaining what we do and how we can help. maybe even a bit less on the kind of pushing sales as much as I thought we might do. I'd say the thing that's probably changed the most is having to grow up a little bit in terms of certainly engaging with our first contractor. So like we probably did that in the first 3 or 6 months. So that we had to get a bit serious there, make sure we did all the due diligence and got everything that we needed in place for that. But I think hiring Rob then took that up a step. So having actually building out that employee proposition, being responsible, being an employer, that was the thing, and probably the leadership and the support that comes with that, and kind of accepting that Hyperact's a thing now, we're responsible for it, and we need to nurture it.
If you're in a conversation that's where a company is potentially looking at a few solutions, how would you differentiate yourself against other people?
So I think the main thing that I would say, and I probably touched on it in some of the answers of earlier questions, is that kind of cross-functional nature. So I think we've been quite intentional with the way that we tried to frame Hyperact and services across product management, design, and engineering. We've always felt kind of the competition tends to specialize in one of those areas, ultimately leading to kind of weakness in other areas. So whether that's more of a kind of engineering house that builds things, whether it's more of a kind of the bigger consultancies who might be more kind of hands-off and strategy and more kind of consultancy offering rather than doing. I think we've really tried to frame it, and it's how our first kind of 7 engagements have gone, really, that it's cross-functional teams, it's product design and engineering, it's getting that right and that blend and having strength across those 3 things, because you need all of those to deliver and to have the impact that you need. So I think that's probably the main one. And maybe the other thing is how we're consciously trying to target like organizations that are kind of startups or scale-ups, maybe, 0 to 5-10 years old, but not to be too hard and fast on it, but ones that are kind of maybe established product market fit and are looking to kick on to the next thing. We're already doing things quite well, but need to, are creaking and need to move on. So maybe not the kind of typical digital transformation and the bigger organizations that some of the other competitors would go after. So being very focused on that kind of modern ways of working, and those kind of maybe more tech savvy organizations.
Second question is, to many listeners who are trying to see how they can grow, most people come with a network. I think that's like kind of low hanging fruit. And I think you're still in that phase, it seems, which is great. That's good for your business. But obviously, when that dries up, there is a need for you to, go out and find new business. Your current makeup of your business seems, from an experience standpoint, is tech heavy. So, how do you try and figure that out in your own mind and your team's mind about what you're going to do when your network dries up? Just to maybe give a sense of what you're thinking to help other people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a couple of things on that. So I'd say as we've progressed and got to the point we're at now, I think one of the most effective kind of business development vehicles we've had is just delivering really well for the clients that we've got, and kind of building up case studies and building up that reputation. So there's a bit of a network effect there, really, which has already seen our network grow and led to other opportunities. Indeed, some of the kind of like newer engagements that have not come out of our direct network. So we're already kind of seeing the effects of that. I think the next step for us is like marketing. We feel is an area which we touched on just before the call. Actually, like we're in the process of hiring a marketing manager. Sam, Rob, and I can do some of that, but we know that it's not our bread and butter, really. So bringing someone in who hopefully can help push that, help get those case studies in front of potential clients, can help really build up our reputation, so that inbound hopefully increases and that network gets wider. So that's the direction that we're heading in.
And tell me, why did you decide? Most small business owners, they have to decide one way or the other. They can't have everything. You don't have the funds. You're bootstrapped. it sounds like your business is quite conversational consulting heavy. So my assumption was that you would probably need someone who is more commercially minded and can steer a consulting conversation to get you more business. But you've opted for a marketing person instead. Just talk us through that. Why did you think that was a more of a priority for you than maybe hiring someone who could actually hit the phones and find new pipeline from that?
I think it's the way that those first engagements have landed. Like, we've got enough confidence that we can cover those bases. I think between the three of us at the moment, I think like that's not been the trickiness. I think once we've got those conversations and that awareness is there, being able to move that forward, I think we're quite comfortable with in terms of the skills we've got. The gap is more on the marketing side. That may change, and definitely we know that that's not our bread and butter, to use that term again. But it's like that might be what we evolve into. Maybe as we step away from client work, Sam and I, or it could be that we bring someone else in. I think it's a lot of it is still, like you say, quite early doors, and we're still feeling our way through that.
That's really interesting. I suppose I want to move on a little bit. Like, I still want to talk about your business. I still want to talk about, how everything's gone. But what I'm interested to learn is about what you've learned and the kind of maybe mistakes or challenges that you've kind of had along the way. So would you be open to sharing, like, some of those like mistakes and learnings, as you've gone through the process of building Hyperact for our listeners, and also what you learned from them?
Yeah, definitely. And there's probably a fair few to pick from. Maybe if I start with kind of the challenges that we've had over the last year or two, I'd say there's a couple of biggies that spring to mind. I guess when we started out, there were three co-founders. So the story I've told so far is almost the genesis of the idea. Sam and I kind of acquiescing on it, but I think the fact that the proposition was always product management, product design, and product engineering, we always felt we wanted a third co-founder on the engineering side, because at the end of the day, like, that's a cross-functional team tends to have more engineers. You can't ship, you can't have impact without building a product. So we did start out with a third co-founder, a chap called Rob. He, like, everything's were going really well, and then after 6 months, kind of out of the blue, like, Rob decided to step back, and that was probably the biggest hurdle that we had. It kind of boiled down to, I think it's a very different beast. His background was similar to me, being a contractor, independent, working in cross-functional teams. To do that alongside growing Hyperact, just decided that wasn't for him, which was a bit of a shock, big bump in the road. I think good that we clocked it as early as we did, and maybe didn't have the impact it would have done later on. But that certainly knocked us out of kilter, set us back a little, kind of left us a bit lopsided as well, which we're still very behind, and we do want to press on with kind of getting a bit more engineering muscle. But that was probably the biggest one. I don't know if there's too many lessons we can learn from that. I guess it's...
Well, I mean, I'd probably say lesson learned there is that you're going to have bumps along the road that you aren't expecting, right? And it's how you bring yourself back to pivot. Every small business owner has to go through pivot stages, probably daily, so I think that's a great example of like an unexpected event that's happened. And you've had to sit down and think, okay, great, so what's next? Some businesses fold for those reasons, and for you to still carry on and still be successful is a testament to the business model and the overall vision of your business. So yeah, I think that's a really good milestone. It's a pivoting moment that I think people can learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. It's almost that mentality of, if you can get through that and focus, kind of when the next one hits,
Was
better
giving up ever, when that happened? Because I bet it was quite a shock. Was giving up ever on the cards? Or were you just like, you know what? No, I'm going to make this work?
No, not at all. I think 100% focused on certainly getting to the point that we're at now. We felt there's no reason why we still couldn't. I think maybe it gave us confidence that we'd we'd brought in, leaning into our network of contractors on the engineering side, we're still managing to, get high caliber engineers and have impacts there. Felt maybe in a way it galvanized us, really kind of a bit of a, that difficulty kind of spurs you on a little to try and push on.
Where do you think you are at your growth stage, right now in terms of your business? Where do you think you are? And I guess this kind of feels like one of those really rubbish job interviews where it's like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? But I am going to ask that question, so I thought I'd just front load it there.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I've been surprised if we got away without that one. Yeah, I guess to the point earlier of our inception and really having this, here's where we want to be in 5 to 10 years. Like, I think that still very much stands. I think we've not changed that too much. We do have ambitions to grow. I think we did have projections for where we wanted to be after 2 years, and we're not far out from that. I think it's been, really good. We've where we want to be really is like any organizations, particularly kind of startups and scale ups, like I said, if they at the point where they're starting to creak or they need support, they're looking for creating a new product. That Hyperact is the go-to consultancy really if they need that support. Really kind of making that as accessible and easy to engage with as possible. So it's really kind of seeing it as why would you not augment or get some support? And so that's where we want to be, particularly around the north of England, but go broader than that. But we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. And right now, a couple of years in, so the fact we've made our first hire, we're pushing on with more hires. We've seen revenues increase, our EBITDA increase, some conversations with investors, which is an option, like not something we need to do, but something that might help us go a bit faster. So there could be movement in that space.
That's an interesting conversation. Did you actively seek those conversations, or did they come to you? And what is your thoughts around getting investment to be able to maybe grow? Like just give us some of your thoughts around that as someone who is already seeing profit in the business, so doesn't necessarily need it, but knowing that actually if you don't have maybe a pool of money, you can't grow as fast maybe. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so it's somewhere in the middle, I would say, in terms of, I think, we won an award a couple of months ago at Yorkshire. We're headquartered in Leeds, so we entered the Yorkshire Business Awards there and won Startup of the Year, completely unexpectedly.
Congrats!
And that got us
well done.
People with quite a few different, particularly Yorkshire-based species. And some conversations came that way. I think working with startups in and around the north as well. A lot of them have had seed investments, so we just had conversations organically. And I think the encouragement that we got, particularly when we mentioned how our EBITDA has progressed and how we're profitable, we've opened a few more conversations just to, we feel it's the responsible thing to do. Let's understand it a bit better and see how it would work. But it's not something we want to rush into really. We just want to take our time, see what we can learn from that process.
Good advice for sure. And I guess speaking of advice, I wanted to ask you actually for our listeners, especially ones that are thinking about possibly starting their business or maybe expanding their business or whatever. But if you could give small business owners any one piece of advice right now, what would that be?
I'd say the thing that's probably go a few ways with this. Maybe it's keeping that focus, not spreading yourself too thinly. I think we've learned maybe over that first year, 18 months, we set goals and work on a kind of quarterly cadence as a lot of product teams typically do. But we've seen us kind of taper that over time. It's our biggest learning there is we're spreading ourselves too thinly. Let's focus more effectively. Let's be very, very clear on where it is we want to go to and how we know we're going to get there and track that. It's almost, so I think it's that kind of radical focus and not stretching yourself too much.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for that.
It's actually interesting you say that because most small business owners kill themselves to be able to try and get ahead. But it sounds like you've intentionally created a much more balanced view on focusing on things and then still having the right time. I suppose, here's another question. Whether it's your intention or maybe it's just by design, because you have two small boys who probably are like looking at you to entertain them for as long as humanly possible. So you probably have a balance because there is other things on your radar that you have to actually take care of. But it is good to hear that it's you purposely aren't thinking about overdoing it for yourself in the first phase. It's good for you and your mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good point as well. I think it is looking at that holistically, and that balance is key. Like if that balance was out with me or Sam, then that's going to affect the whole of Hyperact and now so that's key as well. It's not just getting the work elements right and that balance; it's the broader thing. Definitely being intentional around that.
Well, I think I'd like to actually go into your expertise in field now, the real meat and potatoes of you as a person. So I want to talk about products. I want to talk about product development, and I'm going to kick off with a really broad and annoying question, and it's just your opinion. So I'm just interested to hear what you have to think. What makes a great product?
Okay. Yeah. Start with the biggie. The first place I'd always start is with users, typically customers, depending on what the product is. But I'd always bring it back to meeting user needs, solving real problems. That's always the key for me. And everything just kind of hangs off that. I think doing that then in a way that like meets business goals, ultimately makes money. If it's a kind of private sector thing, like keeping that front and center sounds simple, but it's really hard. So that's always bringing it back to that. And then ultimately it's that kind of user experience then. Like it's having that product that meets a need, but does it in a way that works really well for users.
I wanted to actually ask a follow-up question because I was listening to your answer and then something struck me that I'd just be interested to know for myself actually. And I've got a favorite product, but I want to know what's your favorite product of all time over the last, well, how long you been alive for, right? Or even before, what inspires you from a product perspective?
Yeah, that's a big one. Not just a cop out because it's sitting there, but like iPhone jumps to mind.
Yeah.
Like I think that's probably the biggest shift I can think of. Getting one, what year would that have been? 06, 07 or something. I maybe got one. That kind of shift to it. And the added complexity that they've got, that it's not just software. Like it's hard enough just doing software, but to take into account the hardware elements of it. That's probably as good an example as I can give.
But I remember it's a lightning in a bottle moment that, when they did the conference and Steve Jobs stood up there in his turtleneck and being able to have little things that go into apps and download them, it kind of blew my mind because I was just ringing and texting people, at the time. So it's difficult for me to look past that as well because I feel the same.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm really disappointed with both of your answers. I was fully expecting it to be Capsule CRM, but that's okay. Yeah, we'll figure that out.
But yeah, like the way, like I've just got flashbacks of like the announcement that of Steve Jobs doing that, where he kind of framed it as three different products. It's like, we've got like being able to browse the internet. We've got, I think, the email on your phone and songs in your pocket. And then kind of spinning it into, it's just one product.
Yeah, it's just this thing here. It was my, and like I felt with the iPod it was less like, I mean, it was pretty cool, the iPod, like I loved that as a product. But the iPhone was like, it's one of them, like I felt that the iPhone when that launched for me, it was a bit like a landing on the moon moment. In our generation for sure. For Christ, this is a big deal.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask another question now, and I've been reading your blog and in preparation for this conversation. And one of the things that you talk a lot about is having a product mindset. And, I just wanted you to talk to us and tell our listeners what a product mindset is and how valuable it's been for you and how valuable it might be for our listeners.
Yeah, okay. Maybe start with a caveat on this. Like, maybe there's a better term for it than product mindset. Sometimes that can like turn people off calling it that, because it's almost as if that product manager's pushing that onto people. But I think it's broader than that for me. Like Sam, my business partner, wrote an article around this a couple of months back, and like we kind of worked on it together. But we've always wanted to try and describe like the characteristics that the practitioners have that work on really great products. And it's not just being a good product manager, or it's not just being a really good engineer. It's about kind of the bigger picture. So I think the term like outcome focus, again, it's a broad one, but I think it's really around like not just focusing on the thing that you do. It's like everything that a kind of cross-functional team does, or even an organization, it can be broader than that, is working towards that outcome. So it could be like, whether it's a user outcome or a business goal, everything that you're doing is working towards that. And it's kind of breaking those boundaries and not being stuck in your silo of just doing the thing that you need to do or getting carried away with the process. It's let's do everything that we can to move towards that goal, even if it's not necessarily my area of expertise or the thing that I traditionally own. So that was kind of the first one. The second element of it is more around, I think the term used was like unit economics, really. So it's more of that pragmatism that I've touched on earlier. A lot of the time you can build products, but you build them in a way that over time becomes unmaintainable, or you're building elements that you're over elaborating. I think it's really being disciplined to pare that back. Like, I think maybe one of your earlier questions you asked around what makes great products, I think, and it's probably telling that I didn't say that first and like front and center, but simplicity, actually keeping it really, really lean and maintainable. And not only from a, maintainability perspective, but from your user experience perspective. Like, what's the number? Is it like 80% of features aren't used? I think was the one that typically gets mentioned. So being really, really disciplined on that one. And then I think there's a third element to it as well, which is like kind of the terminology that's used and the broader piece of actually the ways of working that we always take for granted. So things like being very focused on users, kind of ideal customer profiles, kind of having a modern understanding of data science, analytics, the way things like that work. So that kind of broader, really using those modern ways of working, kind of that more product than project. So it's a very broad, all-encompassing thing, but it's like it's intangible to a degree and doesn't get talked around. So that's what we see. Like, you can't always put your finger on it, but if you find someone who's got that, like, that's almost more important than being really good at the core thing that you do.
There's a great answer, and like you can apply a lot of the things you've just said there to your business. Simplicity is essential. When you bring in a new business to market, and for your customers, and potential customers, yes, but then also simplifying it, for you to deliver, as well. So that's super interesting. Yeah. I don't have many more questions. I suppose one of the questions that Steve and I chewed around actually with each other before we met you was product-led growth. Oh. And that's talked about a lot in various different tech companies and various different and for B2B SaaS, what we've found is like a lot of smaller companies start off down the product-led kind of growth route, and then reach a point where like that might not necessarily work for them anymore. So I wanted to get from you, like, what does product-led growth mean for you? And, for our listeners, why would they want to pursue that avenue and approach?
Okay. So I guess like product-led growth to me is it's more like the products being the main vehicle for growth, really. So a bit of a less of a dependency maybe on marketing and sales, and the products doing more of the selling. So that could be things like, I guess it's like having a real focus on being really easy to use and really easy to onboard. Maybe exploiting things like any kind of like virality, whether that's like referrals, whether it's users be able to bring other users into the product. So I think it's like I've probably never worked on a product that's got it in that sense. I've seen some that have introduced elements of it and had some success with it. But I think what I've seen is that you can't really retrofit it. So I think like when you mentioned small businesses, like that for me is almost the best opportunity to do that when you're starting out, because I think what it's quite all encompassing as well. It's not just your product teams that need to do that. It's kind of the whole organization needs to kind of get.
It's a mindset.
Yeah, exactly. It's a mindset. It's gearing up your onboarding, all of your customer comms, the way that you frame things, and appreciation for like having to have the bar this high in terms of user experience, and that being ring fenced. We have to be able to do that, which might mean we can't do other things. So it's not without its challenges, and it doesn't work for all products as well. Like if some products are very focused user bases or they're really complex, then it doesn't work. So it's certainly not a silver bullet. But like I guess it depends on what the product is. It'd be if I was starting a new like product company, I'd be keen to give it a go if I felt it fit the target market. But the key for me is always being very pragmatic and adaptable and acknowledging that if it doesn't work, it's okay. Plenty of organizations have succeeded without it.
Well, listen, Dave, I am out of questions here on my end, and I know that
it's been great.
It's been a fabulous conversation. I've very much enjoyed speaking with you. I suppose the final question for me is, you got a lot of guitars behind you. Who's your favorite band?
I've probably got to say I'm in a pretty good position actually. I'm seeing Liam Gallagher Sunday, so Oasis, which probably got me into guitar, and I'm seeing the Killers on Wednesday.
Wow,
they're two of the top three, with Radiohead being the other. So yeah, looking forward to this week.
That'll be a really good set of gigs. Well, listen, really appreciate your time, Dave. Thanks for coming on. And for our listeners, thank you for listening to Small Business Diaries. If you want to like, favorite, comment, subscribe, that'd be fantastic. And do let us know in the comments who you'd like to have on the next episode of our podcast. Bye for now.